Our guest is Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Senator Murkowski, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, John.
Let me ask you first about something you just discussed when you made opening remarks here at the conference. When you talked about, in your discussion with Mike Sfraga, about narratives and establishing narratives. What is the story now of the Arctic that can be told in a way that resonates with people who aren't part of that part of the world? Because as you know, this town lives on narratives.
It does. And I think the Arctic narrative is one that is really evolving. It's changing as we speak. And I think that that's a significant part of what needs to be heard around this country, because for so many, if you had no understanding of what goes on in the Arctic, in your mind you think frozen, dark, not much happening there. That is so not today's Arctic. It is an area that is experiencing climate change perhaps more notably than any other part of the country. What many viewed as just this frozen area of ice between Alaska and Russia and Canada is open water in many, many parts of the year now. And it's not just open water, it's what's coming through the water. It's ships, it's vessels, it's maritime traffic, the likes of which the local people, the small villages along the coast are looking out their window and they're seeing the world going by. So it is, as some have described, it's like having a brand new ocean open up, the size of the Mediterranean opening up. So it is a very evolving, dynamic part of the world.
When you certainly don't have to convince your fellow Alaskans that the United States is an Arctic nation.
Right.
What about your colleagues in the Senate or in the Congress as a whole? Do they get it? Do people understand that the U.S. is an Arctic nation?
I think people are coming to understand that we are an Arctic nation and that we have a role, we have a responsibility as an Arctic nation. But it's been a while. I've been working at this now for 15, 16 years. I think we're making some headway, some traction. Initially, what I was trying to do was connect a member of Congress with what happens in their state to what's going on up in the U.S. Arctic and Alaska, and for instance, what level of exports might a state like Iowa have to try to bring some connection. In fairness, it really didn't work. What has captured the attention, I think, of many of my colleagues now is what they're seeing in the context of national security and then energy security. They're now aware that there's significant resources up there. What does that mean? They're not really quite sure about that. The area that really does seem to have garnered considerable attention is Russia is paying an extraordinary amount of attention to the Arctic. The resources that they are investing, whether it's energy-related, commercial activity, military presence, there is a lot of activity that is happening in the Arctic right now. But it's not just Russia as an Arctic nation. They're seeing China's interests. They're seeing the interests of a nation like India that is considering building an icebreaker. So when you're in Iowa, and you might not think Iowa has much connection to the Arctic, but you're looking at India and China and saying, why are they focusing so much attention on it? Maybe there's a reason that I, in Iowa, need to be paying attention. And that's where I think we've seen the conversation shift.
When you talk about it in terms of the geostrategic importance, is the operative word at this point mostly cooperation or is it competition?
I have always been one that says, look, the Arctic is about cooperation, it's about collaboration. We want to be working together because this is a part where if something happens, if there's an accident up there, a ship should be in danger or distress, if there is an environmental disaster, we're all in this together, so let's be working on it. In fairness, the word competition has really come into the conversation because of what we're seeing with, again, more movement. When you now have access to resources that you didn't have before, that generates a level of interest. Interest generates a level of competition. It doesn't necessarily mean conflict. Competition sometimes can be healthy, can be good, can spur innovation and investment, but there is a level of interest from others outside of the Arctic that is developing into what could be described or termed as competition.
Two priorities that you already mentioned, security and energy. A third, which I hear you speak about all the time, is concern for the people who live there and people who've lived there for generations. How do you keep that at the forefront of these discussions so they're not lost in the shuffle?
Well, first of all, you have to remind people that the Arctic is not this snow globe that sits up on a shelf and we don't disturb it. The Arctic is home to some 4 million people. Don't forget that. But more important is use the expertise, use the knowledge, that traditional local knowledge of the people who have lived there for thousands of years, who have, through their observations, a keen understanding as to what it means to observe changes in your environment so that you remain safe. The opportunity that we have to learn from those who are so closely connected to their land and to their environment, this is an extraordinary opportunity for us. And so let's make sure that we don't forget them at the table when we're talking about policy initiatives. It should not be about what happens to you. It should be with our Indigenous peoples, sharing all that they know, making decisions that will impact them first and foremost. Let's not do it around them. And so I think we have an opportunity here to set the table very clearly when it comes to institutionalizing some of those who will be those policymakers. And our Indigenous peoples need to be part of that policy table. So the legislation that we have introduced that refreshes the Arctic policy, that allows for greater participation of tribal organizations and Indigenous peoples, more seats on whether it's the executive committees or the regional committees within the U.S. Arctic Research Commission. This is how we ensure that their voices are heard.
The rapid changes taking place, many of them, if not most of them, driven by warming ocean temperatures. The sense of urgency, and it's talking about political hot potatoes. In this town, it's still difficult to talk about climate change in a non-political way. What's your read of the sense of urgency related to how quickly things are changing, and then how quickly or not that our government is responding?
Well, first I want to start by saying I think when you speak about climate change in a political way, good luck.
Right.
When you speak about climate change in a factual and matter of observation, you can be critical of me because of whatever political posture I may take on something, but when I make an observation about something that I have seen, something that I have felt, something that my family has lived through, that's a different way to enter into a conversation. So when it comes to the urgency, you know, Alaskans are pretty matter-of-fact about what they are seeing in front of them because it is almost I would say a daily reality, if you will, that this is the world that we are in. And so how do we address, how do we prepare, making sure that when the fall storms approach us, whether it is an evacuation plan, whether it is revetments that will help to temporarily hold back the fall storms. These are things that people talk about with a sense of pragmatism, but also an urgency because they see how quickly things are changing in front of them.
It's not theory, it's their lives.
It's not theory. Yeah. And this again goes back to You can have political conversations about it, or you can actually go out and see for yourself.
Final thought is looking ahead, trend lines or markers that you could identify for us. Those who watch the Arctic and watch Arctic policy, what are the things coming up in the near term that people should keep an eye on?
Well, you clearly have the environmental implications as we see changes in the Arctic. I mentioned in my comments that this has been an extraordinarily warm year in Alaska, but in fairness, it's been warming years coming into 2019, and as such, we're seeing things that we really need to understand better, whether it is the mortality that we're seeing within certain birds or with whale, some of our sea mammals, better understanding what is happening as you see warmer ocean temperatures, the impact on fisheries. So making sure that we are appropriately resourcing the research that we need to better understand what is happening. This is an important aspect of it. And truly from the issue of whether you call it competition or just ensuring a level of national security in the Arctic, that is something that I think you're going to see more resources trained in this area, whether it is on the maritime side or in the air, just making sure that Alaska's geostrategic position is clearly recognized there, and then really building out some of the necessary infrastructure for this increased maritime commerce that is happening whether we're ready for it or not. So let's figure out how we get ready for it. Let's make sure that we have a deep water port that is closer than Unalaska, some 800 miles to the south of our North Slope area. Let's make sure that we have the search and rescue capability, just the preparedness for what we know is going to be coming.
Senator Lisa Murkowski, one of the world's leading voices on the Arctic, thank you for joining us at the conference today and for this interview. Look forward to what you'll be doing in Arctic-related issues in the future.
There's a lot going on.
Always. Thank you.
Thank you.